I've built a few mocks on this channel so far, but nothing as big as this. And to make this possible, a couple things are going to have to change around here. My Lego room is not set up for a build of this scale, which means it's time to completely overhaul things. Let's take a look at what needs to happen before we get started. So to create space for this large mock, I'm going to need to pretty much reorganize my whole Lego area. What you guys usually see is just this section over here where I'm sitting at my desk, and I usually do most of my building here. I've got some part storage under the desk and stuff like that, but I also have a second desk area on the side over here, and then a little workout area with a treadmill and some weights and stuff like that. So I'm gonna try and move this treadmill into another room along with the weights, and then reorganize this space. I think I'm gonna get rid of these desks and try and get some new tables, because I want to kind of create an island in the middle of this area here, and then put part storage underneath it so that I can have a really large tabletop space. I feel like that would give me a lot of workspace area, but also a good amount of storage underneath, because I could get some more of these organizers, because I'm going to be buying a ton of parts. I started doing some research into different tables for this mock space, and just a couple days after I started, I was watching one of Ryan's vlogs, and in that video, he showed that he was trying to make a table that would take up just about the same amount of space as what I needed. After seeing that he was able to find what he wanted at his local Costco, I decided it would be a good idea to go check out my Costco to see if I could find the same thing. Luckily, I was able to find those same tables in stock at my Costco, and they were exactly what I was looking for. So I cleared out my Lego room, brought them back to the house, and started building them. I knew that this was going to be a lot of table space, but seeing it all put together really puts it into perspective. I'm super excited to get started on this build now. But first, let's take a look at some of the parts that I picked up for this build when I was in Chicago recently. So these are the four main part types that I was able to pick up in Chicago, and I think they'll be super useful for the build. I got about 2 fully stacked cups worth of these dark bluish gray plates that I think should be useful for different structures and things like that. And I think all 3 of these blue pieces will be great for building all of the different crystals that we see on Christophsis. I've seen some other people use trans blue in their Christophsis builds, but I really like the look of this color, and I think it's a little bit more vibrant. There are certain scenes in the movie where I think that this color is the more accurate representation, and in other scenes there's a bit more of a green undertone to things. Either way, this is going to be a much more cost-effective way to make those crystals, because this color is way cheaper than trans blue. Okay, so now that we're all set up here, you can see that we're looking at a build that's about 6 gray base plates wide and 2 deep. And the reason that I chose this is because it's about the size of one of the tables at Brickworld Chicago. As you can see though, we're missing one of the gray base plates here, so let's get that taken care of real quick. Okay, so now that that's all sorted, let's talk about the layout a little bit. And instead of just kind of laying things out on the base plates here, I'm going to do a quick sketch for you guys just to give you an idea of what I'm going for. Real quick, before we get to the sketch, let me know if you guys want to see a full room tour at some point. I've got a lot more stuff I could show you guys, so definitely let me know in the comment section down below if that's something that you'd like to see. And make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Let's get to the sketch. Alright, so I hope you guys are ready for my amazing sketching skills, but pretty much what I'm thinking here is basically I want to have 3 buildings. So let's just say we'll have 2 of them like this and then 1 of them over here. And these are going to be those hexagon skyscrapers that we see in the Battle of Christophsis. I definitely want to include one of these sky bridges that goes between these 2 buildings. And so basically what we're going to have is in the back section of the build, you've got the buildings, and there's also going to be all of those hexagon shaped crystals that are on the ground throughout the entire landscape. So those things are going to be filling in the back half of the build. And then the front half of the build is going to be completely focused on that bridge battle that happens between the clones and the droids. I want to make sure I include a couple of AV7 cannons on this side of the battle, along with the sort of trench type thing that we see the clones go over. We also definitely need at least 1 large Octopara droid with Anakin standing on top of it. A bunch of droids and super battle droids on this side with a couple of AATs. And at this point, I'm planning on using the AAT playsets for these along with the AV7 playsets. And the main reason for that is just so that I can save on budget and spend more on parts to make the build look cooler. But if I have extra budget left over at the end of the build, I might end up upgrading some of these vehicles to the Brick Vault minifigure scale versions. I've started working on some prototypes for the skyscrapers as well as the hexagon tile pattern that's on the bridge, so let's take a look at those. So I've been working on some different prototypes for the build, and the first thing I started out with was the windows. If you look at the photo on screen now, you can see that the skyscrapers on Christophsis have these trans yellow looking windows. So I knew right away that the easiest way to build these would be to use these trans yellow 1x2 bricks. The only problem with that is that when I looked on Bricklink, the seller that had the highest quantity of these only had 100 of them in stock, and they were asking like 50 cents a piece or something like that, which is way too expensive considering that I'm probably gonna need about 3,000 of these for this build. So I started trying to get creative and looking into some other solutions. So one option that I tried was using some headlight bricks that are trans clear and then putting a 1x2 trans yellow tile on the front of it. This seemed like a decent option. It would end up costing about 18 cents a brick as opposed to 50, but that was still too expensive for my liking. Another option that I looked into was using these 1x1 round bricks to just fill the same amount of space here. I think that this looks okay, but I'm also not a huge fan of that. So I was pretty close to just going with this technique of adding the tile on the front of the headlight bricks. But when I started making my prototype of the first skyscraper, I noticed that I wasn't able to add details in front of this on a stud because the tile stuck out too far. At that point, it occurred to me that I haven't even checked BrickOwl for stock on the 1x2 trans yellow bricks. So I looked on there and I found somebody who had a ton of them for sale for 6 cents a piece. So I knew that this was going to be a much better option for me, and I was really happy to find them for so cheap. So thankfully I didn't have to go with any of these, and I was able to just stick with the simple solution of using the bricks. Quick interruption here while I'm editing this. I just realized I was looking at the wrong part. When I was looking on Bricklink, I was looking at the variant that has the tube underneath the bottom to have better clutch power with other bricks. Most of the trans clear pieces don't have that. So I should have been looking at that version of the part, and I would have saved myself from going down this whole trail here. But anyway, there you go. Just make sure you're looking at the right parts when you're shopping on Bricklink. The next thing to figure out was the ground texture on the bridge. I had seen some other people using a lot of different techniques for making these hexagons for Christophsis, and a hexagon is not an easy shape to make by any means when it comes to Lego. You have to do a lot of funky different techniques and stuff like that to get it looking symmetrical. But I was looking at this option here, and I really like the way that it looks, but when you put them next to each other, they actually can't stick to the studs underneath because they're pushing up against each other with these cheese slopes here. So having a gap this large is pretty much unacceptable. And on top of that, when I looked into the pricing for these using the different bracket pieces and stuff like that, just made this a very parts intensive hexagon to make. So considering the fact that I'm gonna have to make a couple hundred of these, I just didn't think that this was gonna be a very good option because it was gonna be too expensive. So I decided to try and resort to something a little bit more simple. So I threw together this build right here, which is just using these 1x2 slope bricks and regular bricks in the middle here in a snot build. I felt like this was a little bit too wide for my taste and didn't really look very good. So I tried again by just removing the 1x2 brick in the center here and kind of compressing everything a little bit. And that's when I ended up with this shape. Now I know these sides aren't symmetrical, but I like the look of this one quite a bit better than that one. So I started messing around with creating a couple of these, and if you stack them together, you get something that looks like this. And then when you slot them next to one another, you can quite clearly see the outline of the pattern here. So I think laying a bunch of these out next to each other will look really nice. The other good thing about this is that it's super easy for placing minifigures on top because you can just break this apart and swap out one of these bricks for snot bricks and then just stick the minifigure straight onto the studs. I think I'm probably going to build these in sections of 2 or 3 and try and cap off the top with using these slope pieces and a plate and a tile, because what I could do then is instead of having to try and get in here with like tweezers or something to pull these out and change something, what I can do is I could just place a minifigure on here on a snot brick, and then if I want to pick these up and change them out or something like that, I can just grab the minifigure and lift up the whole section of tiles without any difficulty. So while these may not be the most completely accurate hexagons ever, I think that they will do the job and they're going to look good when I get a ton of them placed next to each other. The next thing I moved on to was prototyping the front wall of one of the skyscrapers, because I basically figured that if I can get this sorted right here, I can basically just copy and paste this design on all 6 walls, because if you look at the image on screen right now, you can see that these buildings look pretty much identical the whole way around with a couple of different variations. One difference you'll notice between my design and the source material is that I have these columns built into the walls here, and one of the reasons that I'm doing this is because I have to transport this thing to Brickworld Chicago, and I need it to not fall apart completely on the way there. So what I've decided to do is add these columns in for some strength and stability, but I think I should be able to reduce them by about 1 brick in width on each side, and that'll allow me to shift all the window pieces over by 1 stud, and then I should be able to add another row of these 1x2 trans yellow bricks into here. I also decided when I was building this I was going to use a bunch of different colors of plates and tiles and bricks and things, because it'll make it much easier on me when I have to go total everything up. So when I'm counting what pieces I need to replicate this and multiply it across the entire section of this building, it'll be super easy to do that. So once I make that final change, I should be able to place some pretty big bulk orders for the parts to make these skyscrapers, and I'm thinking that's probably what I'm gonna start with this build. I'm gonna try and knock out the big things right away and get them done. I think designing the buildings this way though will make it super nice, because once I get a floor built, I can basically just rebuild the same exact floor over and over, and I can stack them up to get the buildings as tall as I want them to be. I'm hoping to go for 3 buildings with about 10 floors each, maybe more, maybe a little bit less on some to add some variation. If you look at the overall size of the footprint of the skyscraper, you can see that it takes up about the size of one gray base plate. And I wanted to do that to keep these buildings on a single base plate so that everything can be modular. And when I take this apart to transport it, I'm not gonna have to like split buildings in half or anything like that. All right, so it's time for me to go place a whole bunch of bricklink orders now. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Building Christophsis, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next update. Let me know if you have any ideas of fun details that should be included in this mock. Put your suggestions in the comment section down below and I'll read through them. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good one.